Hello everybody, welcome to the World Building panel. We will be starting in just about 2 minutes, okay? Make yourselves comfy, find a good seat. Little bit of maintenance, we are very full. So if you leave, they're not gonna let you back in, okay? Please mean it if you're gonna leave. If you go to the bathroom, you can let our awesome helper outside just know, hey, I'm coming right back. Just tell her that, okay? But because we're full, we don't want it to be disruptive to everybody. We want you to really enjoy the full hour. You know, people coming in and out is kind of not great, right? Good. I'm glad we're all on the same page. So maybe I'll start out actually by asking you guys a couple questions. So, yeah, that's right. Did you know that you came to LightBox Expo for you to be on display? Like, yeah, you're part of this panel. We're all in this together. I'd love to see you if you could raise your hands if you are in the industry right now and you are working as an artist. Ooh. Awesome. Okay, cool. How many of you are students? You're almost there. Ooh, we got about equal, I think. That feels about the same. How many of you are just so excited to be here? You're just fans. You're just fans. Yay! Oh my gosh, we got a lot. Okay, cool. Well, we got a good mix of everybody. I'm really excited to have you here. Welcome to our panel on the building blocks of world building. I'm Renee di Cherri. I'm an artist, and I've also had the pleasure of working at Autodesk and at Adobe in the digital art space. So I have a huge passion for this. And I am so excited for all of our elite artists that we get to chat to today. So the first thing we're gonna do is we are gonna let them introduce themselves, and I am going to go through some of their beautiful artwork so that we can enjoy it. We will then go into the conversation and chat about world building. And if you've got any questions, we're going to save about 10 minutes for that, okay? So hold those till the end. I'll come around with a microphone, and we'll get those questions answered. With that, I would love to start with Armand. Will you please introduce yourself and tell the fine people what you're working on?
Hello.
Let's get you closer to the mic.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, my name is Armand Baltazar, and currently I am an author and illustrator for a book series called Timeless for HarperCollins. I have had a career built on animation and storytelling. I started off working for DreamWorks Animation on Prince of Egypt as a background painter, and kind of moved along in the animation space as an art director and concept designer for Disney and Pixar. I'm working on a lot of great films, from traditional 2D animation to CG animation, things like Prince of Egypt and to Inside Out and Brave. And was really fortunate to be inspired by people like James Gurney to follow my dreams and create a story and illustrate it and bring it to the world. And I get to take the stuff I do in movies and apply that to my passion of making those great stories.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Armand. I'm going to move on. Yeah! David, can you please tell the people about yourself?
Hi, my name is David Levy. For the geeks, I'm Val. Childhood name, I guess. I started as an industrial design and architecture student, and then I went into video games for 15 years. In video games, I worked on the first Assassin's Creed, Prince of Persia 2 Throne, an amazing guy there. And then at some point with video games, I was hired by Disney to work on Tron Legacy. I was supposed to be in the movie industry for just 2 months, and I was there for 15 years. And then from Tron Legacy, I worked on Prometheus, I worked on Ender's Game, I worked on Suicide Squad 2, I worked on Sisterhood, that's going to be an HBO Max show about the Bene Gesserits, the world. I worked on another little project managed by that dude over there, Avatar 2, 3, 4, and I don't know, 5. So I've been very lucky to oscillate between games and movies, and now, as of now, I'm switching back to video games. I'm going to be working as a lead artist on the Dune video game by Funcom, the Norwegian company. There you go.
Nice.
visual effects and doing matte painting, digital, and worked on a bunch of movies, like worked on Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and a ton of stuff. And then I transitioned more into concept art, and then kind of got on the pre-production side, and was having a blast in concept art. And then I kind of found my way into production design. I was concept art director on the first Avatar, and then Starberg, and I got my first production design gig on Maleficent. And then after that, I've been production designer, co-production designer on all the Avatar sequels for the last 9 years now. And thankfully, it's coming out finally this December, I promise. So yeah, no, just happy to, do this amazing for you.
Well, we're happy to have you. All right, next, James.
Hi, my name is James Gurney. I'm from New York State, but I went to school here in Art Center, but I'm a dropout. I dropped out and became a hobo. I rode the freight trains across America, true story, and wrote a book about sketching. And then I got a job doing background paintings for Ralph Bakshi and Frank Frazetta, which was my introduction to animation and the film world. And from that idea, I had this idea to work on a project called Dinotopia, which I wrote and illustrated. And it was based on the sketchbook of a Victorian traveler in a lost world where dinosaurs are still alive. So these are full-length illustrated books, and there are 4 of them that I did. I've been working on that project, but also a lot on outdoor painting, plein air painting, and gouache and traditional media. So I'm kind of the old school guy here, working in physical media and painting outside a lot. So these are, some of these things you're seeing up here are National Geographic illustrations that I worked for. So I was an archaeology major at UC Berkeley before going to art school. A lot of that archaeology background helped out when I was doing reconstructions of ancient worlds for National Geographic. So I worked for science magazines, doing dinosaur reconstructions, and lots of other things like that.
We're so glad to have you. Sonja, please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Sonja Christoph, and I actually started off not doing art. I was an assistant director and I worked on set in Hollywood. And it wasn't until the writer's strike in, what was that, 2008, 2009, that I found myself with a lot of free time on my hand. So I was like, all right, what am I going to do now? There's only so many yoga classes you can take, and I kind of suck in yoga too, so it wasn't really great. And then I saw a presentation on VFX on 2012, and I was like, oh wow, this is cool. I want to know how to do this, I'm curious. So I went to Noman, and I took a couple of classes. I saw some beautiful, amazing, inspired artwork by these gentlemen right here. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to switch. So I went back to school full-time, became a CG artist. I started off being a matte painter first. I worked in the VFX industry. I went to ILM. I worked on things like Doctor Strange, Tomorrowland, Agent Carter, and then, I don't know, 5, 6, now, how long did I go? 8, whatever, doesn't matter. Quite a while ago, I realized that real time was becoming a thing, so I need to learn Unreal. So I went to ILMX Lab, did some work there, worked on Carnegie Arena, which won us a Special Awards Oscar, and then I went into games. And in games, I've worked on The Division 2 and Hitman 3. And right now, I'm working on an unannounced game IP, and I'm very excited about it. I can't talk about it, which really sucks. But anyways, that's me. Yay!
And please introduce yourself, Sparth.
Hi all. My name is Sparth. It's just not my real name, obviously. Just for the small anecdote is, I was like 18 or 19 or whatever, and I was living in Paris, and the reason why I took a nickname and I was just not going to use my name, Nikolai Lockertsen, which is my real name. My dad was coming back home sometimes with a new book, by some guy that was actually having my name, the stealer. And basically, for some of you who know, he was a Swiss traveler doing a lot of books about traveling. His name was Nikolai Lockertsen. He was from Switzerland. As a result, my dad would just come back home and just open the door and say, "Hey, Nick, you wrote another book. Congrats!" And so, this funny pleasure was to just like write these books that were actually just not written by me. It was kind of mildly annoying, and as a result, I just took the nickname because I felt it was just like more accurate to what I wanted to do. I've been working in the industry for now 25 years, and for those of you who remember, or that are old enough, before the video game industry and the first digital era, pre-internet it was called the multimedia era. I actually just worked for the multimedia era, which is just making me a bit of a weird boomer, but at the same time, it's the truth. A lot of us were just also coming from an industry that was prior to having internet at home. Now, when it comes to what I've done, it's been like 25 years into video games. Every time I had a bit of an entry door into movies, it was implying that I needed to just go into the LA production, and I just always just said no. And in a way, it's a bit of a bummer. I would have loved to. I did a few intrusions into movies, but very, very, very. I have been working. I worked for Ubisoft and a lot of other different companies back in the days. Prince of Persia, where we've been with our friend Thierry Toison. We were the first concept artist on Assassin's Creed back around 2004. After that, I went to work on IT software with John Carmack and the guys at Gate in Texas for about 3.5 years. And finally, I just I worked for Microsoft for 14 years, close to 14 years. And I was the art director, first concept artist, and an art director for Halo 4, Halo 5, and I was the art director for Halo Infinite, that was just out last year. And that's about it. It's been a life filled with games and contribution to games, and hopefully a lot more to come.
I changed nothing. I don't know what happened, so I apologize, but I promise that was the last image in the slideshow, thankfully. You got to see all the beautiful images. All right, so world building. You guys know what world building is, right? But if you will indulge me, I'll sort of set the stage, and I'll let these lovely individuals correct me. World building is creating the unreal as if it's real. It's making an unbelievable scene believable, so that you are a Victorian person going through a world of dinosaurs, or you're in outer space, or you're under the ocean, and it feels like you can step inside, so that we can take you to somewhere you've never been before, and you still believe it. Yes? No? Maybe? Perhaps? With that, how do we do it? How? How do we make that unreal real? Where do you start?
I think you start with reality. You need a touchstone so that you look at what makes our world real and what we relate to, and you try and find the equivalent to that. That's one example. There's many ways to come at it, but I find the relatability of it is what makes it successful. If it's too out there, too different, or too esoteric, you don't buy it. So I think you need to relate. If you're talking about, let's say, people, not some alien or something. Sorry. You need you need to find something to relate to. So what do you just ask? What do you do during your day? Okay, you sleep, you eat, you get dressed. you have a job. How do you survive? Like those basics. And then so once you start asking those questions of how you survive and how you function on a day-to-day basis, that starts answering those questions. But asking the questions is the most important part.
Yeah. Everybody agree? It's those questions.
Yes, and I would agree too that it starts with something that's real. And for me, when I was trying to come up with a Victorian explorer's sketchbook design, I went to the Library of Congress one time to give a talk, and they said, we can't pay you, but we will have our researchers bring out whatever items from our 21 million one-of-a-kind collection to show you. And I said, could you bring out explorers' journals from before the age of photography? So they laid it out on the table, all these amazing sketchbooks that showed people getting haircuts in Shanghai in 1840, and just that point of view that people had as artist explorers back then kind of gave me an idea of what this should look like physically, and the kind of things artists might notice. So that was a launching off point for doing a reader's journal, a Victorian journal. One thing I would say about world building, which as you say, was not really a concept 30 or 40 years ago, world building doesn't happen on the screen or even in a book. It happens in the reader's or the audience's mind. And often the audience has a much larger role in that process than we acknowledge, through the fan fiction and just through their immersion in the subject. Whether they're a casual viewer of a story property or they're deeply involved in it, it's really the building that's happening in the audience's mind.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It reminds me of, I'm sorry, the gentleman who does all the documentaries. He did the Penguins and he'll never do it again. I'm sorry. No, the grumpy man who was in The Mandalorian. Werner Herzog, thank you. My brain's too focused on trying to talk to you guys, and I can't do everything at once. Werner Herzog spoke about that as well, where you're watching a movie, but the movie's not the only story going on, because the story is also inside of all of your heads at the same time. And so I love that. You're totally right. But we're building this world together, actually, with your consent.
And to go on the Herzog kind of parallel, a lot of people think that world building is very rigid and very strict and very organized, when it's the complete opposite. It's more akin to quantum physics, if you want, where it's like you're ingesting tons and tons of information, especially if there's an narrator or an artist. You have literally thousands and thousands of reference images and text and things like that. And you have to trust the process, which is your brain basically, to come up psychologically and unconsciously with stuff. And after that stuff gets proved by the art director or the director, but overall it's really about trusting the quantum process. That's a boiling something in your brain kind of thing.
Yeah, and that makes it very much like exploring.
Yes.
Right? It's virtual exploring, but it's very much like your books, James, where it's you are going to find that place and you need to discover it first. And so sometimes you might just, again, I'm speaking for myself, but sometimes you might just do a painting and you're like, oh, this is asking some questions. I don't know the answers, but I want to know more. And so you, and through David, the process David's talking about, with research and reference, it's not mapped out. You don't do a perfect outline. You don't have all these answers. You just
Why?
I can speak loudly if I need to.
I don't know.
It's fine.
Is that the one?
Yeah, it should be. We can give you that one, and then you can hold it, my dear. We have to just turn it on.
Cool. All right, there we go. No, so it really is like exploring, and that there is no linear path. And then that's kind of the exciting part about it. It is discovery. Is what I would say.
I mean, what I like to do when I think about the world, I actually think about the world almost as a character. I like to think what happened here, what's the backstory, who used to live here, what was their life, what did something happen here, what happened, what kind of impact was there, where is this place going to go in the story? That's also something, right? Because if you're designing for a movie, if you're designing for a game, you have a script, you have a story that you're trying to tell and to support. So all of those things come together when you're building something that feels real, believable, and supports the story. So there's multiple layers that just keep building up on each other.
That's great. It's wonderful.
If I could pose a question maybe to Sparth or Armand or whoever wants to answer it, about what is the best way, what's the best path into world building? Do you start with a character and build the world around the character? Or do you build the world first? I think Dark Crystal was built with the world first, and then they figured out what kind of story, what kind of characters they need to tell. Have you guys run into that question?
Well, I think for me, when you're working as a professional, a lot of times you don't even, you take it for granted because it's your job, right? You come to a project and there is a problem to be solved. There is a world that needs to be fleshed out. The director has, or the storyteller already has a story, and you're having to construct solutions. But, kind of like what everyone's saying is that it's almost like being an archaeologist. You know it's a dinosaur of some sort, but you're uncovering. By the way, I'm ripping this off with Stephen King. He told this little story about finding a story. You're uncovering what it needs to be, what you think it's going to be, and it is part of that process of discovery. But for me, the other thing is that the reason is really, really driving. And for the story that I made, I would make stuff for other people's stories, and then my kid one day said, Dad, I want a story where there's dinosaurs, giant robots, samurais, and World War II heroes fighting Nazis. And I go, okay.
That's a cool kid.
And he's never, and all of a sudden he posed to me something that nobody had ever done in my professional career, and it made me go, I've got to build a world for this character. And the thing is that the world that started to unravel was what was driven by, oh, where's the character going? What's the need? Oh wait, wouldn't it be great if there was this? Wouldn't it be great? And all of a sudden you open up this Pandora's box of questions that you have to continually answer, and it becomes fun and obsessive. And cool.
It makes me think, when do you stop though? When do you just go, okay, it's fine, no, just stop. Like, because I think I would go forever. I think I would just keep asking questions. And is there a way to just, like, be like, nope, it's good enough? And how do you cope?
It depends on the project. I mean, these guys with their books have that sort of freedom, but on a production, it's like, nope, 3 months of pre-production, go. Okay. But the other thing I want to talk about that is funny is and I was fortunate on Avatar, like on designing Pandora, with tons of notes from Jim and all this classic world building stuff, and it was great. And then you come up with these ideas and architecture and theories and all this stuff for years, and then you're shooting. I'm shooting, I mean like virtually capping or something, really shooting. And then suddenly, just for a character need, or I'm on this side of the line, I need the character to come from over here. Let's throw out 5 years of design because it doesn't work for this shot or for the setup or for that scene. And you're like, no, but it does this. Is like, that's great, that's not on screen. You're absolutely right. And so ultimately, it depends on the medium, and we are ultimately serving the story and making a movie. So talking about all the backstory stuff is great and it helps you arrive at a design, but unless it's on screen and pertinent to the story, it's a tool, so it really depends on the medium. But because I've had years of world building thrown out the window.
Well, there's a saying that says writing is rewriting, I mean, designing is redesigning, all design.
Yeah, I just want to bounce back on two words that actually Dan and Sonja actually just mentioned. First was realism, which is exactly this, which is how do you just identify things as real around you, and how do you just suck up all that reality that is just around you. The second thing that Sonja, you used the word that I've been seeing and observing even more and more into the video game industry when it comes to world building, which is the world believability. And it's really a word that we have been using more and more, which is a bit of a portmanteau word for a lot of different things, to be honest, because what is realism and what is believability? How do we just identify to a scene that is real? There's a lot of parameters, there's a lot of things to do to just make sure, from a lighting standpoint, when it comes to identifying things around you that are going to be the real, like Dan was saying, these are just some of these principles that are just super important, and that we have been embedding into all these processes that we've been having for years. Now, when it comes to when to stop, like you were saying, I think that's a very tough one. It's when to stop in production and when also to stop on each image.
Yeah. Yeah, so you think it's realism, that's what you're saying, is what does realism mean?
Well, I was it just really just two different matters. So I was just bouncing back first on, the realism and how we identify things around us, and how do we just retranslate reality. It's a component of world building. And it really just goes through a lot of rules that are pre-existing and that we need to understand from a more academic standpoint, to be honest. And how do we just retranslate all that stuff? But how do we transcend them too? Now when it comes to stopping, that's a huge conversation. And obviously, every one of us around that table and in that public, we are all experts at banning and killing our own art when it comes to going too far, or when it comes to literally burning to the ground pieces that we believe we were going to be successful with. That's the fate we have.
That's heartbreak, isn't it?
Yeah, I think actually for me, on the topic of stopping, I think for me it's always, I'm trying to always balance things out. So when did I get, did I reach a point that for one, it's on budget and on time, and that's a big part of it, but the other part of it is when do I get to the point where I supported the story, I supported the mood, the feeling that this scene, this environment, this image is trying to convey. And at that point, I need to check in with myself, because it's easy, like you said, to push past that and just keep putting too much, and then I'm ruining it all, and then I can start over again. So I try to keep checking in with myself and figure out where that balance is. And sometimes I succeed, and sometimes I don't. So it's a daily struggle.
Yes, I think we all know that daily struggle.
And the struggle never ends. I can probably speak for all of us, where it's you have a mental fight every single painting, and you're just wrestling with yourself. So, okay, I don't know how to get there. Kind of. It's never easy, and I know it's just finding where to stop. I start as a map painter, so you stop when it's 100% real and super detailed and all this stuff. And I kind of got a concept art and production design. It's okay, you don't need to do that, but That's just kind of how I know how to make images. So I do the stupidest thing ever. I go way too far, detail the whole damn thing, then just murder as much detail as I can at the end, while still trying to keep the effect that I want. And yeah, we all have our little eccentricities and insanities.
I think now in the age of social media and the internet, there's an opportunity to hide so many more things in still frames that people can study, games too, but also in books. You can throw layers of detail that the reader can discover. Like one thing I did in the book Journey to Chandara was to print a very detailed map on the inside of the dust jacket, which most people don't even notice is there. But if you happen to open it up, you go, oh my gosh, there's another whole map here. Map making itself is probably one of the most, for me, the most stimulating parts or aspects of world building and most necessary, because it helps to understand how far apart different places are. If you're doing a journey from one place to another, how long it'll take. And when I was doing Dinotopia, I wanted to make sure that the island was big enough to have a lot of different climate zones and landforms, because I had a feeling that I would be living in this island for a while. I want to have deserts and jungles and mountains and other areas. If all I had was just a desert island or a jungle island, I wouldn't have the scope to be able to cover a lot of different kinds of areas. So that's one thing to think about when you're starting off, to think how much scope you want your world as a planet or an island or whatever to have, so that you can really cover a lot of areas in case your world builds beyond your first iteration.
That is such a great question about when to stop. And like Dylan said, everyone said, it's hard to know when to stop. And the thing is, you can kill these things. And what I found is that that is the key thing, is asking myself, or actually what I do is I put in front of fresh eyes, and I said, what do you think this is about? And if my wife, who's usually my fresh set of eyes, goes, it's about this, this, and this, and this, and it's not about the top 3 things that they're supposed to be about, I've gone too far. And then I think back to my training in film, and I remember one of my mentors telling me, like, look, you got 3 seconds on the average of frame being from an audience's eye. What are they going to take away from it? What's the most important thing? What's the second most important thing? What's the most important thing? In 3 seconds, right? Yeah. So if I had this super elaborate, awesome illustration, and those 3 most important things are not being conveyed, I went too far, So, but having people come in and look at your stuff also really helps.
I love that, because an uninformed opinion is actually super valuable as an artist. It does tell you, because if somebody looks at your horse and they're like, oh, that's a great dog, you're like, oh, So I really appreciate that aspect of making sure your thing is reading, your actual creation is getting through. How do you do that?
Well, having a person look at it who's not only a family member, to be honest with you, but a person who has an expertise in an area that you may not. Like in my case, I was doing a painting for National Geographic for the centennial of a grandfather and his grandson in the attic looking through old back issues of the magazine. I had it all mapped out in a charcoal drawing. And I was having some contracting work done. The contractor came in and said, it's a nice drawing, but you framed in the window wrong. You didn't put the studs in right. I said, what do you mean? And so he sketched it out for me, and I realized it would have been really stupid if I put it in the way I first sketched it, because I don't know anything about how you do that to code. So things like that, having anyone who's, if it's someone that knows about the kind of animal you're drawing or the kind of architecture, to get a set of eyes on something that knows something that you don't, it really helps.
How do you do that when it's up to you? Like, how do you, what if you were on a project, you don't have time, you gotta get this vehicle done, and you've never seen a vehicle of this type? Well, do you have any advice or thoughts on how you work that out?
Post it on Instagram and ask.
and I'm sure David can probably speak to this best, but it's just having enough realistic details to sell it that it works. It doesn't have to work. You just have to kind of believe it with enough identifiable things.
I was going to say, you need to imply function. You just make believe that the function is true, is real, even though it's all bullshit.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you leave it up to the 3D artist to figure it out.
Sorry, 3D artists.
One of the coolest things that ever happened was actually standing before a real matte painting. There aren't real or non-real matte paintings, but I remember going to the Disney Museum and they were showing us some of the matte paintings from the Disney classics, painted on glass, that would have to be put in front of the camera when actors painting. And the thing is that these masters knew what the film grain was going to do to the painting. They knew what the lighting was going to do, and they knew how to. They were. Let me cut to the point. They were incredibly painterly in so much of it, except for where you really needed to be looking.
Yeah.
And it was choices made from storytelling. Beautiful storytelling.
Yeah, and I'm a huge map painting nerd. I can't stop talking about map painting. And because the film is soft, they would call it photo impressionism. Every map painting that was too rendered would look super fake on screen. It was the looser stuff that worked well. It was bizarre and awesome.
Yeah, a friend of mine named Christopher Evans was the head of the map painting department at Lucasfilm for a long time. And he talks about the pyramid of believability. I think that's a term he had for it, where you have this kind of area, the zone of the picture where you got to go tight, but everything else has to be loose to look right. If you put things too detailed, it just doesn't look believable at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the same is true in digital. I'm sure Sonja would agree. Like when you do these super tight 4K pixel perfect things, you throw it in the comp. First thing the comper does is blur it a couple pixels. Why did I do that?
I think it's also, to just like emphasize the image flow in terms of where do you lead the eye, what is the entry and exit point on your image, and like James said, where you want the people to actually just like, the eye detainment. How do you want to retain people in one specific area? This is where you're going to add details, and everything else is just going to go a bit more loose to make sure that the flow is respected, and your point of interest into your image are going to be the things that are going to pop out.
I mean, going back to fundamental art skills, right? That's one of the fundamental art skills right there. So you put the detail where you want the viewer to look. It's one of the fundamentals.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're talking about like finished process or not, and I mean, I think you and I kind of represent the two polar opposites, and which is why I mean it's a great experience working together. But the thing is that when I was in art school, one of my teachers was telling me always, let people dream. Okay, let them dream. Don't pre-digest everything for them. But at the same time, there's also the opposite. It's true. It's like detail makes believability. So it's really about like finding that fine edge and it's all about light in here. And in light, when you look in light, even like a day like today, not everything is finished because there's fog in the atmosphere, there's rain, and you can see a building that's far away. It's not finished. Sorry, it's sketched. So it's really dependent on the emotion. Ultimately, it's dependent on the emotion you're trying to convey. Some moods and some designs need and demand that level of detail, and others don't.
And I think getting back to the topic of world building, I think that applies to world building in general, and also when to stop. Have you answered those questions? Do you have enough information to tell the story of your main character? Because you could obviously go down a rabbit hole and design stuff for years and years and years and years and years, and nothing comes out. But you need to, answer the basic things, just your pyramid, and it usually starts with your main character and their needs and what they experience, and kind of build out from there. So it's all the same process at various stages and various levels.
It's micro and macro.
Absolutely.
And one thing I've had to think about as a creator of a literary property that I've illustrated and written as kind of my baby is to think about what marching orders I have to give to other writers or illustrators or ultimately filmmakers who might want to adapt this world. We did a series of 16 digest novels with Random House with other writers who were used to writing other universes. Also Alan Dean Foster, who wrote the Star Trek or Star Wars novelization. So what I asked them to do is to kind of create a world within the world and to invent new characters that are kind of their own and not to tell a story about the main characters that I was working with. So I gave them the map and gave them the basic parameters of the world and kind of let them run loose with it, make sure all the dinosaurs are real, based on fossils, and gave them kind of the ground rules. But to give them enough freedom that they can have fun with it and make it belong to them too. And that gives the readers some scope to build out the world in their minds.
That's beautiful. It reminds me a little bit about fan fiction, like you mentioned, that almost all of you have already done that. You've given people a world to play in, whether it's Halo or Avatar, or even your own Timeless, So you set up those parameters and let people play.
James just said such an amazing word for people who want to build worlds, and that is the ground rules, right? Because here's the thing, if those of you out there that are going to build your own worlds and you can make anything you want, that can also be a problem because you can make anything you want and you can spiral on forever. And unless you give yourself something to hold on to make it real, to have those rules, you have something to sort of play off of. It's just sort of like getting an assignment. You know, your teacher in grade school goes, make a picture, and you're going to illustrate love. Oh, okay, right? As opposed to like, make a picture, and it's going to be of the car that you love the most, or of the pet you love the most. You know, once you start getting into specifics, I'm like, okay, I know how to solve this. I know what I'm doing. You know, but when you're creating a world, when you give yourself like, you know, my world was the city of Chicago, except changed because it was smashed up in time. And I'm like, okay, what would I want to have come back? What would be cool to have come back? What would create problems for my characters if that came back or it didn't come back? Like there's no running water, there's no electricity. You know, what if they only have running water but not something else? You know, so these rules make it stimulate you and hold you into and then have to find solutions.
It's wonderful. So world building needs rules.
Sure.
It needs parameters. It needs to be believable.
And I think you also need to define in your mind what's canon, what's official, and what's non-canon for the fans to work with. I think Warner Brothers learned that with the Harry Potter universe. They were starting to, at the beginning, they were trying to clamp down on anyone who was using the characters or using the property or the logo, and to stop them from doing that. And then they realized, wait a minute, this is like free market. This is good. We should encourage this. Wisely, they opened it up and encouraged it. Within limits, you don't want someone, you know, merchandising too much from it. But, you know, I think Lucasfilm has been pretty smart about that over the years too.
Yeah, it's important to have the fans play back with you, right? So how can you make that happen? And it is free marketing, right? You see everyone excited about Harry Potter, you want to be excited about it. That's how it works. So that's wonderful. I love it. Okay, so world building. What are the building blocks though? How do we actually make it real? You're talking a lot about emotion. You're talking a lot about making it believable. But like, do you imagine? Like, James, are you really thinking like, I am my Victorian explorer and I'm doing this? Do you, like, how much time do you spend preparing before you even put pen to page? Or even with Halo or any of the other, you know, like Avatar, how do you truly put yourself in that world when it didn't even exist and you're supposed to build it?
So I do have a question for my colleagues here, and because I personally have something. It's a bit of a weird process, but and it's like mildly schizophrenic, if I might say. What I do is that I always ping myself in my head, where I'm just going to invent a bit of a second imaginary character that is also me, but I'm just going to speak to myself non-stop to kind of ping myself with the right questions while I'm actually just like trying to do any type of construction work out of an image. So basically, it's like it's another version of me that is asking myself these questions. Like, for example, what are you doing with the ground here? What are you doing with this camera angle? Don't you think the camera angle is just like kind of just a bit too low, a bit too far away? Your characters are just not really full in your scene. You need to really just like have them bigger. And all these questions where I just ping myself in my head, like mentally speaking. And I'm just wondering if you guys have a bit of a similar process.
That's a great question.
100%, yeah. It's very much like, I always question why I'm doing everything. You know, especially because we live in such a world, there's so much incredible work out there right now. And it's inspiring and depressing at the same time. And so you always try like, how am I different? How am I challenging it? Am I doing the same thing? And no one wants to repeat themselves. You know? And so it is 100% asking those questions. And I always try and start with, basically, for me, it's kind of started just like pure escapism, or just like, where do I want to go? What do I want to see? And it started, I was a Star Wars kid, like I mean most of us in here. And you know, I just grew up like, nope, I want to go to those worlds. I want to design, like I want to feel that. And so it made me excited to go there. You know, that's where I knew I was onto something.
I think to just add to that, you know, interestingly, as you all know, as we all know, we always give our best when we are surrounded by people that are actually having a great time, that will just help you, you know, aid it all. And when you have these epiphany moments where you work in a great synergy with other people, the problem is, you're not always surrounded, even in the pandemic now, we're all working from home, even like big industry, you know, big studios, everybody's just like working from home with like 90% of us. we don't really always have either a friend, a colleague, or like a mentor, or people that can like literally give you the best advice at the right time. So I think that creating that imaginary character of you, the second you, that can literally poke you with the right proper question, is a way to actually, it's a replacement where your friends and some of the great people that can actually inspire you are just not going to be around you. So it's a bit of a replacement method, but I think it's super vital to do that.
Yeah, what I also like to do when I have that inner dialogue as well, but sometimes when I get to a point where I'm stuck, I actually write it out. And I usually do that before I go to bed. And somehow, magically, I'll wake up in the morning and I know what to do. I don't know how that works, but somehow I just overnight, I don't know, subconsciously, I'm thinking about it, I'm figuring it out, and as I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, all right, this could work. Let's try that.
You know, as you were describing that, Sparth, all I could see is like you as Gollum, when you were talking, hey, you know, kind of like flipping back and forth to yourself. But I mean, you have to have that inner voice, and you have to have that objectivity, and that's the weird thing about being an artist. And like for James, yeah, I know how you must have felt, because I've gone through it. When you're actually writing your own world, you actually have full control. You're writing the world, you're writing the characters, you're writing the story, you're making all the art, you have everything in control. You have to check yourself, and sometimes for me, the checking myself is, like when I'm writing a character, there comes a point where I'm not writing the character is writing himself. It's like, I wouldn't say that. The character's like, I wouldn't do that. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I wouldn't do that, you know, kind of thing. And then like for example, that happened to me when I was designing this really, really cool vehicle. I'm like, this could be the greatest vehicle of all time. But I'm like, oh, that's really boring, because when it comes up to an obstacle, push a button. Oh, he solved. Push a button. Oh, he solved that. Push a button. Oh, it's got wings now. Oh, it can do it. I'm going, no, I can't. That's no fun. It's more fun if what you design doesn't work. What you design is like, ooh, the character's really cocky. Yeah, it's gonna be great. And you know, he was too cocky. You didn't think of it. And like that becomes fun, but you have to start becoming your worst enemy. Oh yeah. And then it's the quality. Actually, what it is for me is that you want to create an experience for somebody, and that actually comes first in the quality of the story, not just like, look how cool I can make something. Yeah, you can make it cool for somebody else, because I really enjoy making it.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think what we have to do as creators is come up with a creative process that allows us to string together these moments, these character moments, these story moments, into something that really is fun from each moment to another. It's kind of like electrical linemen setting up utility poles and stringing wires between them, and putting some guy wires to straighten them out here and there. But you want to have each moment, each time you come to the next pole, it's got to be something really worth getting to. It's easy if you're not doing it right to end up with a lot of shoe leather. That's the term for when you spend a lot of time just trying to get from point A to point B, which is pretty boring. And there's a lot of tricks and sleight of hand you can do to get the character from one place to another and to get them to the next place. Because really what you want to do is deliver the moments for the characters, like you guys have been saying, and make it exciting as a story, so that the reader's right there with you.
Self-antagonism, that's the sort of theme, right? And I know what it's like, I draw too, and you look at it and you're like, ooh, is it really good? Is that really rendered? Does it really have a shape? Is that the right color? And you have to be brave enough to say that.
So for me, I mean, hearing you guys, for me this is hell. I mean, I am already very hard on myself on a daily basis. Like if on top of that, when I'm painting or sketching, if I was to talk with myself, it would lead to doing nothing. So for me, that's pure nightmare. My solution is more, it's I guess, more third person, where I associate a world I'm supposed to design. For me, it's not world blobs, it's more world blobs. And the way I approach it is more a language. Okay, well, what is this language we're going to have to speak? And I cannot jump into a new language I've never learned just by freaking trying to write a book. I just can't do that. It's too daunting to me. So the way I do it is more piecemeal, where I'm thinking, okay, well, this new language has specific letters, verbs, subjects, and the way I translate that in design is shapes, light, and color. So what are the basic building blocks of that world? And by doing that, it's less daunting to me, and I can do like very simple images that don't take me too much risks and things like that. And then I see where it goes. And And as I go, and we work together, so you know, I do a bank of shapes, volumes, okay? And with those volumes, I'm going to try to define an image, you know? Doesn't work, well, I'm going to destroy those shapes. And it just helps me, well, taking myself by the hand instead of arguing with myself, basically.
I can see that, especially like in Tron, right? Because Tron is an established world. You can see it in your head as soon as you say that. So I see what you're saying. Like, you just think about the colors, the shapes.
Yeah, for Tron, I mean, that's a good example because I mean, the person that really deserves to be here, it's Ben Proctor. And when I arrived on Tron Legacy, I was very green and innocent and happy days. But Ben, I mean, what's amazing about Ben is his control. You know, and when I arrived, there was already a map of the world. You know, he had decided rules of like 30, 60-degree angles for the whole universe, and he created kind of like a very comfy spot where any artist could land in and just fly with it. You know, so that's one way, once again, where he decided the language, a basic alphabet. Here we go. I guess that's the best thing to say. An alphabet, and we could all just jump in and create words with the alphabet that he had created.
Yeah, and that's where, talking about rules, right? If it's too wide open, it's too daunting, but we just create some basic rules, then that's Tom's creativity.
Yeah, I think there's also the fact that, and you mentioned making basically for beginnings for films, there's always a hierarchy. There's still things that are going to be, the priority is like that, the most important things. And after that, can't just come details, colors and everything, but I don't know if you guys agree with me, but I would just throw this out there. Composition and flow is the first building block of your image in terms of, well, connected obviously to the narrative of it. What is the storytelling you want to be conveying? What is the interaction, of course, between characters and their environment? But all this needs to take into account composition and how your image is going to have the proper flow that is intricately connected to the narrative you want to be putting. If you want to have an epic image, you're going to go into very strong symmetry, because symmetry is synonym with a lot of static. You know, it can just give a bit of a heavy image depending on where you put the camera. If you want to have a very dynamic image, you know you're going to be playing with a lot of diagonals everywhere, because diagonals imply dynamic and movement. So what I mean is that composition and the way you're going to structure the backbone of your image, this is the first building block material and stuff that you want to be playing with.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. We have about 5 minutes left, so
Okay.
for us to chat, and then I'll start taking questions.
And one more point to build on what you guys have been saying is that I think if you're all working on worlds or characters or designs that are in the early stages and you haven't worked out the details of the story yet, I would encourage you to develop both the visuals and the words at the same time. Even when you do a sketch, just to write the name of the building or the person, or come up with a word for the mood or the emotion you're trying to convey. And I think that way it often stimulates new ideas visually if you have just a word, a phrase, a sentence, or some overheard dialogue. Because I think when you have a huge pipeline of a big company, often we end up with screenwriters developing a whole world and story design in writing first before they even bring in visuals. And then it's much harder that way, I think. I think one of the geniuses to Walt Disney's early 1930s approach was to storyboard early and to start with visuals early on in the process, and to have words and pictures developing together. So even if you're an individual creator, you can do that at every stage.
It was the coolest thing on the Avatar sequels when we started for the first couple of years. You know, there was Jim and there were other writers. It was more almost like a TV show. It was like a writer's room. And it was right below us, and it was fun to actually go out to lunch with the writers. Like, you never do that in film. That's like unheard of. But it was the coolest thing ever, and they were super kind, and they were super excited. We would each get each other excited. And Jim would, take our art down to the writers, and the coolest compliment you get was when we finally saw the scripts. He literally just described my painting in that script. I'm like, that is cool. Oh wait, this is how this works. And it really, like, some painting that might just be, I don't know, I thought this, would be fun or look cool, or we haven't seen this corner yet, suddenly gets written in as a set piece. And stuff like that is just the most rewarding. So that's where you can do that yourself by writing and illustrating. You don't need a writer's room, but I'm saying it's a great process.
To combine the two things you're talking about is what when I worked on Prometheus, you know, we had a big chance of working with the director, and he would do exactly what you said. He would come to us, illustrators, you know, which I mean is great if no one's an illustrator, and he would go and test the lines on the script on us, you know, as we're doing the concept for this, and he would come and be like, and the guy is saying, so is this a weird movie? And he would look in our eyes to see if we reacted good or bad, you know, and if we were like, he'd be like, that works, okay, cool, come do another one. You know? But he would test it with everybody in a room, and just to see the results, and also to inspire us.
You know, riffing on something Sparth said, actually all you guys said, it's, I did a talk the other day and I was showing some stuff I did for Pixar, and I go, here's an image, and this is about longing for your parents, and this is an image about like, something which is about, actually I kept talking about emotions. I'm like, why don't you talk about your technique and this and that? And I go, well the thing is that using all these techniques, using the composition, the staging, the lighting, the color, I like to think of it as like your instruments, you know, something music, making music, right? And sometimes one part is louder, one part is softer, something is faster, something. And the thing is, you as a creator are orchestrating each instrument, and they're not always going to be the same. It's not formula, but you are playing those things differently and appropriately to create your response to the music that you want. You know, and that's the thing about like what Dylan's doing. I heard somebody tell me once that the soundtrack is like painting a portrait of every moment of the film with music. That's what we're designing a game. That's what you're doing. You know, you're actually keeping a bigger voice.
I thought it was fascinating to hear Sparth talk about composition and story, because I mean, I think we would all agree Sparth is the undisputed master of composition. And so I liked hearing you talk about it telling story, where it's not just about a pretty image, but about leading your brain in the story, what you want to discover. I thought that was really nice.
That's beautiful. With that, we should start taking questions. So I will have to steal that back, and we'll have to sort of finagle our microphones a little bit more democratically. So you guys can have that. I'll have you two share this, and you guys are doing great sharing that. Now, I know you guys have a million questions, right? So let's go ahead and raise your hands, and I will come around and get to you. I will do my very best to be monogamous. I will start with where I'm at, though. I see you have your hand up, sir.
Hello. So we talked a bit about creating rules for your world, right? And kind of just giving yourself some parameters to play within. But early on in the process, do you ever find that maybe you set a few too many rules and you feel restricted? And then at that point, do you have any advice for injecting some novelty back into this world that you're trying to create?
Too many rules. What happens when it's too rigid?
Too rigid or too literal. Like I asked my friend Alan Foster, the science fiction writer, and I said, you know, there's a logical problem to Dinotopia. If you have a Victorian explorer going to an island where dinosaurs are still alive, and I mentioned the Latin name of a dinosaur that was discovered in the 1960s or something, that couldn't be possible. And he said, don't worry about stuff like that. I mean, there's going to be someone who's going to point that out, but you have to, you know, you have to just ignore that logical problem for the purpose of your book. So I think you can knowingly break rules and be informal that way, if it makes sense for the reader, I think.
You heard it from James, break the rules. He told you, you got a license.
And I think what you said about being too literal, I think it's a huge part of designing a game or movie. That's the biggest enemy from concept art, I would say, being literal.
Get more loose.
Well, I have a thing here. When it comes to doing book covers, always, I mean, if you have done book covers through the years, and when it comes to book covers specifically, the interesting thing is that I actually read the books after I've done the covers most of the time, not before. And the main reason is that there's nothing more difficult than actually just illustrating the book when you actually have all the book in your mind. When I just do a book cover, I ask for a brief that's just not going to be more than 5 or 6 lines with the main, you know, outlines of what the book is going to be about, and maybe one very specific scene. When you take too many of these parameters into consideration, it becomes super overwhelming and complicated. You need to go straight to the point, because as Armand was saying earlier, image making is going straight to the point. It implies that you only have you know, for that specific visual trip, you have a span of like 5 seconds. 5 seconds that's how much it's gonna last. So you need to just like really always be super frame and square, go straight to the point, and illustrate the core idea that you want to have. And that's going to kind of help when it comes to how complicated it is and how constraining it is. Push away a lot of the things that are going to be polluting your main core idea when it comes to image making.
That's not good advice for me because I'm too A-type personality. I'm crazy. We've got another question here.
Hi, my name is Kiara. I was wondering how you effectively research and expand your visual library.
So how you research and how you get images and visuals.
Well, for expanding the visual library, I think the best way for me, at least, is to travel a lot, which is also something that I enjoy. It's very important to live your life. You know, look up from your phone and look around you. There's inspiration wherever you go. So that's how I like to build my visual library.
+1.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
So
and I was just saying, like, to piggyback on that, that's far and away the best way to learn, but obviously we can't go travel appropriately for every single project, which is unfortunate, and of course we'd love to, but there was something that happened in Avatar, because James Cameron has done everything, where I was using some photo from someplace that I wish I could have gone to, and then he tells me, oh yeah, no, that one does that would never do that, because this moves that way, or it's squishy, or it responds, or it's that big. I'm like, well, of course you know, and my thing is that it showed the problem of just going on Google. I'm like, oh, that's pretty, throw it in there. It's fine if you're stealing a shape for an abstract thing. I was being a little more literal, and he just had that real world experience. I went, nope.
you gotta be careful about how real it is. That makes sense. I've got another question here.
Hello, my name is Stephen, and my question was primarily for Sparth. Sparth, James Gurney, and Armand Baltazar. How would you suggest a storyteller or world builder who is used to working strictly in prose adjust their descriptive style when working with a visual artist, like, for example, a novelist who's never done a picture book or a graphic novel, working with an illustrator for the first time?
So prose versus working with, so you're talking about like poems.
Prose would be like novels.
Novels, okay, so long form. How does a writer come together with an illustrator or a designer? For world building. Have you ever worked exclusively with somebody like that?
Some of my favorite fiction writers started out as journalists who are good at starting out with the lead of the story and getting to the point, as you guys were saying. But I think one thing you have to think about as a writer, if you're working with a visual artist, is what works best in writing and what works best visually. So you might not be describing the scenes visually, and let them do that and work more on dialogue, the smell, the sound, all the other senses besides visual ones.
That's great.
I think the best option is to just do what Armand does, which is both. You know, both the visuals and both. Because writers that, you know, when you work with, you know, writers, when it comes to book covers, they have tons of ideas, and it's just not, you know, always easy. You know, when I was illustrating, you know, some of the novels that Greg Bear did for the Hero Saga and all that stuff, these guys are just gonna be, it's just non-stop, like, crazy ideas. So at one point, you need to be able to slow the train and just like be able to just like go on a specific pathway to just like make one single image that makes sense. Because again, the straight to the point process is super important. But yeah, it is challenging.
You know, if you're going to collaborate, right, with somebody who's a writer and an artist, the thing is you have to complement each other, because there's nothing worse than, let's say, I'll just use the word writer instead of like the word director, who will pick your artwork, say, oh my gosh, your work totally encapsulates what is in my head and tells my story, because I love what you do. And then you start to collaborate with them and say, yes, but I actually want you to make images that look exactly like Dylan Cole's. Can you do that? Because I love what you do. And I'm like, but make it look like Dylan Cole's. And I'm like, so if you're not going to be able to write and illustrate your own book, you definitely have to be able to complement each other, and you definitely have to use the power of writing and images together. You know, it's kind of like, he turned the corner, sweat was on his forehead, he smelled something foul, he heard this, all these things that you can't get across in the painting. But the page, James Gurney painting, dinosaurs breathing down your neck, you know, and so a lot of it is planning, pacing, collaborating, making music together. You play the piano, play the trumpet at the right time. you know?
That's exactly right. And I think the words that come to mind is trust, respect, and empathy. You know, if you work with someone you trust and admire, or an artist or a writer, I mean, a writer has worked many years to get where they are. An artist has worked many years to get where they are. So if you enjoy, I mean, working with someone, you have to trust and respect them, and trust that they're going to come up with something that's going to be way better than you, because you're not a writer or you're not an illustrator.
That's great. I do have another question. Oh no, please go ahead, Sonja.
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that real quick. Just adding to what you said, David, is also, it comes down to communication, right? It's communication and also being open-minded on both sides. That you're both open to feedback, to inspiration, to ideas from each other, and that really becomes teamwork, and that's how you work together and create something hopefully amazing.
I love that.
It's supposed to be fun.
I'm over here in the nosebleeds. I'm sorry. We've got a whole incredible crew hanging out over here. So, we've got a question.
Hi, my name is Tan. I'm a game student, so this is going to be a little bit related to working for video games. We talked a little bit about how in films there's a certain scale involvement that can be created based on camera angle and frames of a camera. But in video games where interactivity is a bit more emphasized, players have a little bit more freedom to choose what parts of the world they get to focus on. And also the camera's a little bit more constrained to first person or third person. And so how do you go about maybe adjusting the amount of world building that's being done if a player needs to interact and perhaps learn a little bit more intricate details about the world?
So like a free world, a fixed camera, how do you work within those constraints?
I think that question is so large that it's actually just not easy to give you a bit of a straight answer. I think as soon as you just mention that question, I would just say this is a level design question. It really has to do with the building blocks for video games is level design. It's the way that level design and the parameters and the constraints and basically the general alphabet of that world. What is it? How is it defined? And then you just work with this. And finding camera angles. You're right, everything in video games now is, especially now when there's just the concept of like extended open worlds. And I would say super fast. I think that a process that is derived and connected to what we call, as you may have heard many times, POIs. Point of interest is one good way to put it. It's like, how do you direct the flow? Optically speaking, I would say, what are the attention, the things that are going to catch the player's attention, and how do you just make sure that the world you are creating is compelling no matter where you look at in a 360 type of way? How do you direct the player in a very point of interest driven type of environment?
Yeah, just to add to that, it's actually it's a lot of departments that you work with. It's for one, it's game design, then it's level design, it's the environment art team, and then you're also dealing with technical artists because you're creating a game, so it has to run. So there's a lot of departments that you're working together, and also talking about the point of interest. Most games have what we call a golden path. That's the path that we want to lead the player into the story. So there is a flow, even to open world games, that I think a lot of people sometimes tend to forget, but they're there, and we very, very carefully craft through composition, through lighting, through again all of those fundamental art skills to really direct the player, hopefully in the direction that we want them to go and to experience the story and lead them into this world, even though it's open world. So that's how it's a carefully crafted experience from a lot of people.
I love that. It's great. And I hate that we don't have any more time for questions. We're already 2 minutes over because that's how much they loved you. Let's give them a big round of applause.